Good evening, welcome to New Horizons. If you do have a mobile phone, if you would like to put it on silent, please, thanks. Right, massive welcome to Danielle La Verite with Fearless, Free and Politically Incorrect. Danielle asks certain questions of authority figures, certain celebrities, social services and others who may be operating who may be operating outside their job descriptions, shall we say. She asked these in a unique way, fine with some, not with others. Capable of making a builder blush and well outside the realms of political correctness with its restrictions and unnecessary presence. A modern Marxist experiment. She does this to achieve the exposure of awkward questions she poses to persons, some of whom are paid to look after our interests, apparently. I have refused to censor this in any way. Please welcome Danielle La Verite.
Hello. Okay, right, where to start? I have to have my cup of tea with me. It's my little safety net, I suppose. I haven't been doing this whole public, truthy type stuff for a very long time. So I know a few faces here this evening, but there's probably a few of you that haven't seen the videos that I do or the radio show that I do. So if I just give you a brief background as to how that all works. Basically, a few years back, I've always had a real fascination with psychopathy, serial killers, and the like. And the more I researched them, the more I realised that there was a connection. And I was finding connections with some of the most notorious serial killers to government organisations. And some of them are slightly tenuous, but there's a lot of them that you can really get hold of and look at and think, this is great, this is ridiculous. So some of them, some of my favourite serial killers are definitely involved in what I would class as either some kind of MK Ultra program or part of a system that the authorities use to cause mass hysteria and total fear. They do tend to change these boogeymen. Obviously, we get our boogeymen and they change over time. So the serial killer thing is fairly quiet these days. But the connections I found, to name just a few, are Bundy, Nielsen, Dennis Rader, who happens to be my favourite, if you can have a favourite. He is the BTK killer, bind, torture, kill. And it took them years to find him. I think it was 30 odd years. Hindley, Brady, Yorkshire Ripper. These are all killers that I have absolutely, without a doubt, found to be working within the system. And what could be much scarier than a serial killer on the loose in your town who happens to change everybody's behaviour? And I remember a few years back when we had the Suffolk Strangler, and I lived not that far from Sussex at the time. And it was in the days before I really knew anything about the realities of the system, shall we say. And I remember absolutely crapping it, running home from work in fear before they caught this guy, not really understanding what was going on. Now I have an understanding of these situations and I get why they do this. When you can change a community's behaviour by terrifying the living daylights out of them, you've got them eating out of your hands. And this is something that you can apply to many aspects of society in the way that they treat us. So I find all of that stuff quite fascinating. And it's even more fascinating in the sense that the psychopaths in charge are the ones who come up with these ideas. And they pretty much run every single thing that goes on, as I'm sure everybody here is fully aware of. Anyway, that got me started, and I would just write the odd thing, and while I was researching, and then somebody sent me some information, a video that an interview that Aaron Russo had done about 9/11. And while I was working on my serial killer stuff and I started looking into psychopathy within the establishment, it all just started to come together and became quite obvious. So I am not the kind of person to hide my light under a bushel, shall we say. And on my own personal Facebook, I would write the odd thing about the system and how we were being screwed over. And at that time, I had very mainstream, what I would call very mainstream friends. And I started to notice that my friends started to disappear in droves. I started to think, hang on a minute, there's nothing weird about what I'm saying, this is all completely normal, where are you going? Something, obviously, as time goes on, a little bit of giggling, I'm sure a lot of you have experienced the same kind of thing. Anyway, being me, I thought, bothered, I know it's real, so I'm going to carry on. So I started to make a few more friends that were more like-minded and what have you. And as time went on and I was writing these silly things, and they were all about serious subjects, but I just added a little note of humour to it, because this stuff can be, sometimes you just want to go out and hang yourself. If you get too serious about it can be really quite frightening. And then one day somebody had the genius idea, Danny, why don't you make a YouTube video? It would be really funny. So I thought, I don't know, do I really want that kind of thing? Nobody will watch it, I'll look like a bit of a div. That isn't what happened. I did look like a div to some people, but I uploaded a video, and it was basically an open letter to David Cameron. And if you haven't seen it, there is a section in the video where I call him a ham-faced Zionist cuntwaffle. I think, something along those lines. Anyway, it was because you see a tiny little person like me, I came across as all innocent, you know, sort of starting to ask normal questions and what have you. And then I come out with that, and obviously the video picked up really, really quickly. Look, you know, this is quite funny what she's saying. And everyone likes to slag off David Cameron, let's face it. So that kind of, I made a couple more videos and they started to get passed around, and within a few days, I'd developed quite a big following already, and it just escalated and escalated. And I've been really lucky that it has turned into something much, much bigger, which means I now get to come to places like this and talk crap to all of you, and hope I can teach you something different, or that you can teach me something different. And hopefully I can make you chuckle along the way. Okay, so what I would like to discuss this evening is various issues that I myself have faced as a parent, somebody that lives within the system. A lot of this has sprung from my own experience, and I'm sure there'll be a few of you here today who have had similar incidences occur. A few years ago, my children, my eldest daughter is in secondary school, and I had a phone call one evening that I missed from her school. The phone call came at, I would say, 5 to 4 in the afternoon. I missed it, I phoned the school back, and I continued to phone them until 10 past 4 with no result. So I, just like any normal parent, thought, no problem, I'll call them first thing in the morning. 9 o'clock, I called the school. In the 15 minutes between them phoning me and me not being able to contact them, they had reported me to social services for neglect of my children. We were then subjected to a 3-month evaluation by social services. A member of staff at the school, who shall remain nameless, basically made up a story that I'd gone away and left my children at home for 4 days on their own. Now, the interesting thing about this, which made the story so utterly ludicrous, and I'm just going to add, I didn't tell them the truth. while the evaluation was taking place. And I'll make that clear as to why as we go on. The social worker comes to my house. Absolutely no idea that the school haven't informed her, as I had when my daughter joined the school, that I'm agoraphobic. And just for anybody who isn't sure what agoraphobia is, it is technically classed as a fear of open spaces. But what it actually does is means you can very rarely leave your house. Now, I suffer with panic disorder, anxiety disorder, and agoraphobia. And when I do something like this, I have medication that allows me to be able to come out and do whatever. So I kept this quiet because I knew that the school knew, and I knew that there must be some ulterior motive behind what they'd done. And instead of shitting my pants, like most people would when social services suddenly appear in their lives for what seems like no reason, your back's already up because you're being accused of something you know you haven't done, and you've got to start wondering why. Now, rather than shit my pants, I decided to go and look into every single aspect of what takes place during a social services assessment. And I found a fantastic website, which off of the top of my head, I'm afraid I haven't got, but I will make it available to anybody that's interested. And I would absolutely advise that anyone who finds themselves in this situation goes and does this, because it saved me. It's a website that a guy set up after having the same similar experience where social services just appeared in their lives for what seemed to be no reason. And it tells you step by step how to get through a social services assessment without being screwed over. And something I found incredibly interesting when I started to read this was, now most of us were raised with good manners. You know, one of the first things you do when someone walks into your house is you offer them a cup of tea. You offer them a drink. It's what we do. We're polite. We're British. That is what we do. I can tell you now that when social services come into your house, if you offer them a drink, they will mark you down on their little form because you're not taking their assessment seriously enough. That is absolutely true. So when you behave like an ordinary, decent, well-mannered human being, they mark you down because you're not taking them seriously enough. Now, that website was fantastic. It said, don't tell them anything that they don't ask you. Because I think you feel, in that position, you feel that the more information you give them, the more innocent you look. The more you let them look into your lives, the more innocent you look. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Never offer up any information that they haven't asked for. Now, it became quite obvious to me that the school hadn't informed social services of my agoraphobia. And given that I'd read that I shouldn't say anything, I didn't say anything. So while this woman's doing these assessments, it takes her 3 months to ask me if she can have access to my medical records. So at that point, I've got a big grin on my face because I know what's coming. 15 years worth of agoraphobia. She came back to my house within about a week of that and said to me, why didn't you tell me you were agoraphobic? Because there's no way you could have been away for 4 days and left your children. She said, and all of this wouldn't have been necessary. And I said to her, because you never asked. It's as simple as that. She dicked around for 3 months. The first thing she should have done was ask for any information that the school had about me. She should have asked me if I had any medical conditions. Nothing. The assessment is based solely on trying to get information out of your children. She also, this is how good this social worker was. I'll tell you what she said to me. She said to me, your child isn't a genius. She's an ordinary child. You know nothing about your daughter. And I said, well, that's really interesting, because at 4 years old, my child was identified by Ofsted as a talented and gifted child. And at 14 years old, which is how old she is now, 2 years on from the social services debacle, my child is sitting her GCSEs a year and a half early because they've run out of work to give her. But a woman who sat in my house for 10 minutes, spelt my name wrong, got my kids' names wrong, told me that I should build a bond, I should allow my alcoholic parent to look after my children on her own, was telling me that I knew nothing about my child. This is state intervention at its very best. And she said to me, "Don't worry, we don't want to take people's kids away from them. It costs us too much money." Really? That's funny, because last week I was given a similar talk to this down at the BASIS project in Wiltshire, and I'd mentioned that I believed that there must be some ulterior motive as to why schools appear to be referring so many kids for so many ridiculous incidents. Now, at my daughter's school, I get told regularly of incidents, very regularly, of social services being called. There was one last week because of a 14-year-old girl who lives with her single dad, and they reported her to social services because they said she needs lessons on how to look neat and tidy. They are now paying someone to teach a 14-year-old girl how to be neat and tidy. Now, I can tell you now, as the mother of a 14-year-old girl, if this person knows how to teach a 14-year-old how to be tidy, I want her around my house. And she needs to be earning money somewhere else because she'd make a fortune. And I did say, there has to be ulterior motive. There has to be some kind of reward. Now, what I didn't realise was that right at the back of the audience I had that day was a lady who was a social worker and a former teacher. And she informed me, very reliably, that every child that gets referred by a school to social services is paid £5,000 apiece. £5,000 per child per referral. And then every organisation that is then used, say it's a 10-minute assessment by a psychologist to check the child's state of mind, they get paid a base level of £3,000 per child. And obviously that goes up and up and up. And when you think of how many organisations are involved in removing a child or getting involved in a family, that amount of money is staggering. Schools are basically being used as a racket to traffic children. Now, I thought it was bad enough when I went into a school and told them that I felt it was being run like a Nazi prison camp. When you realise that your child is at that much risk because schools are so desperate to get their hands on money, you have to start wondering why on earth they're shelling out that kind of money between those authorities. I find it astounding and really quite terrifying. We put our kids in schools on a daily basis. They are in the care of that school. We go off, we go to work, we do our daily thing, and you think your children are safe. Well, unfortunately, with the way things stand, it's not that straightforward anymore.